Bienvenidos a Hablemos Cyber con su servidor, Alberto García. Muchas gracias por conectarse en el día de hoy a nuestra sesión del mes de febrero. Estamos hoy a 20 de febrero del 2025. Vamos a esperar que nuestra comunidad se vaya conectando antes de empezar. Vamos a darle unos minutos. Estuvimos trabajando aquí con nuestro compañero Yatin. Él está localizado en Canadá y allá hay una tormenta. Así que pudimos trabajar con él hace unos minutos, así que por eso es que estamos comenzando unos minutos tarde, pero vamos a esperar que nuestra comunidad se vaya conectando en el día de hoy antes de comenzar. Bueno, en el día de hoy vamos a estar hablando de un tema que es sumamente importante, que ha impactado y sigue impactando tanto a pequeños negocios como a medianos negocios y a empresas a nivel mundial. Y es la amenaza de ransomware. Esto ocasionado por varios grupos de actores de amenaza o cibercriminales que comprometen la infraestructura de diferentes organizaciones o hacen el ransom. Básicamente capturan, van capturando la información, hacen infiltración de datos para entonces cobrarle el dinero, ¿verdad? O revender, básicamente, dual extortion, lo que hacen algunos grupos. Para ello, ya que esto es un tema que impacta a Puerto Rico, ¿verdad? Y al mundo entero, tenemos a nuestro colega Yatin en la pasada transmisión del mes de enero, estuvo con nosotros, dio una breve introducción. Y el tema para hoy es Ransomware Threat Landscape. Y para ello tenemos nuevamente a Yatin con nosotros. Hey, Yatin, how are you today? And thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Alberto.
All right. I just gave a very brief introduction in Spanish to our community here, but now we continue in English. I will let you introduce yourself, quick introduction for the people that doesn't join in our streaming on January, and then you can take from there.
Sure. Again, thank you so much, Alberto, for having me on the channel and allowing me this opportunity to present about ransomware. So, my name is Yatin Wadhwa. I have been working in the information security industry for more than 6 years now, having worked in security operations, threat hunting, and also in threat intelligence. I'm also a contributor at the DFI report, having worked in investigations involving Black Suit ransomware, Conti, and Alfie as well. I've also presented at a SANS Ransomware Summit 2022, where I got the opportunity to present our findings on ransomware investigations in the year of 2021, where we highlighted some of the TTPs which are used by threat actors across the intrusions. Yep, so that's my background.
Not too much, right, Yadi? A lot of research and working there. That's excellent. I will share later more about the DFIR project. I think they're amazing. What you and the team they are doing there. Very great reports from the procedure level that I don't see before. Basically, we don't see that too often, and we will share with the community. Okay.
Yes, and in my slides, I will be showing some of the snippets as well from the DFI report, so you'll get to see a lot of stuff from the reports I have worked on and the team has worked on as well.
And that is great. We have here Peter Narvaez, and say that he can listen very well. Thank you, Peter, and welcome. Okay, Yatin, you ready, right, to start the presentation? Let me transfer to you in the way that everybody can see what you have for all of us today. All right, take it away, Yatin.
All right, thank you, Alberto. Just want to make sure if everyone is able to see the presentation.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, all right. All right, so I'll be doing a presentation on the ransomware threat landscape, where I will be talking about how the ransomware landscape looks like in terms of the ecosystem, some of the trends we have seen in the last year in terms of the groups, and also talk about some of the emerging groups as well. Later, I will be talking about the TTPs which are used by those threat actors. So let's get started. Yeah, as I already mentioned, my name is Yatin Wadhwa. I have been working in security operations, threat hunting, and threat intelligence. And I'm also an analyst at EFI Report, performing investigations. So today we'll be talking about the ransomware ecosystem. What are the different components of which work in the ransomware groups? Trends in 2024, they'll be talking about some of the notable groups seen in the last 1 year. What are the ransom payments which the victims have to pay? Then I'll talk about some of the TTPs which have been seen across the different ransomware groups. And then we'll do a case study on the Black Suit ransomware. So this is basically an investigation which I did, and I'll be talking about how the TTPs work across the kill chain. And finally, I will be sharing some of the useful resources which can be used to learn more about ransomware in general. So let's get started. As we all know, ransomware attacks have targeted critical sectors such as healthcare, energy grids, and even government agencies, causing widespread consequences. And it continues to be one of the most lucrative forms of cybercrime. And as such, it remains a critical threat for organizations of all sizes. A lot of ransomware variants such as Logbit and Blackbuster are spread through ransomware as a service. So what is ransomware as a service? So ransomware as a service is a framework or a business model which consists of several components. It consists of an access broker, the ransomware as a service operator, and a ransomware as a service affiliate. So let's talk about what it is. So ransomware as a service operator develops and maintains the tool to power the ransomware operations. So this could be include the ransomware builder that produce the ransomware payloads, and also the payment portals for communication with victims. These programs may also contain a leak site to share snippets of the data exfiltrated from the victims, and also allowing attackers to show that the exfiltration was real and they try to extort the payment. A lot of these programs also incorporate a suite of extortion support offerings, including leak site hosting and integration into ransom nodes, as well as decryption negotiation, payment pressure, and cryptocurrency transaction services as well. So now what the RAS operator does is they sell the access to the ransom payload and the decryptor to an affiliate who performs the intrusion and privilege escalation, and who is also responsible for the deployment of the actual ransomware payload. Then what happens is then the parties split the profit between the two of them. Another component of this ecosystem is selling access to other attackers for various purposes, such as ransomware. And this is where the access broker comes into the picture. So what they do is they infect a system with malware or a botnet and then sell them on the dark web. These access brokers also scan for vulnerable systems like exposed RDP systems with weak passwords or unpatched systems, and then compromise in mass for profit. So what these access brokers do is they sell these initial access campaigns, provide access to the ransomware as a service affiliates, who then perform exfiltration of information collected within the few minutes of the attack. Then after the ransomware affiliate has got access to the particular environment, they would perform their hands-on keyboard activities such as discovery commands, activity based on, and this activity can also vary based on the knowledge, depending on the skill set of the ransomware affiliate as well. So to give you an example, Alfie was a ransomware group which used to operate until March of 2024. And Scatter Spider or Octotempest was an affiliate which used to encrypt all these systems with the Alfie ransomware payload. After the Alfie ransomware group vanished or ceased to exist after law enforcement actions, then Scatter Spider or Octo Tempest shifted to Ransom Hub and Chilean ransomware groups as well. So this is how these particular components work in the ransomware ecosystem. Now let's talk about some of the trends which we have seen in the last 1 year. As reported by Chain Analysis, there has been a decrease in the ransom payments volume year by year by approximately 35 years. So this could be based on the law enforcement action against Lockbait or even Alfie as well. And some of the other trends which we have seen is a lot more ransomware variants emerging from the groups which have been disbanded. For example, we have seen the collapse of Lockbait and Black Cat, which has led to the emergence of Ransomware as a group. Also, we have seen a more adaptive and agile threat environment. Smaller groups dominating low and mid value payment or low or mid value organizations as well. So as you can see on the right, I have there's a screenshot which shows the transformation of the group. So it started with Riot, then it merged into Conti, then it rebranded as a Quantum, and then again it rebranded as Royal Ransomware, and finally, as we know it, it's called the Black Suit Ransomware. So all these ransomware groups are always rebranding or changing their names to avoid actions from the law enforcement agencies. Now let's talk about some of the top ransomware groups which we have seen. So Ransom Hub's rapid emergence as the most active ransomware group in 2024 is very notable. After Alfie's exit scam and the law enforcement actions against Lockbait, Ransom Hub Group capitalized on the vacuum left behind. Ransom Hub was initially suspected of having connections to Lockbait due to the similarities in the operational style, but closer examination revealed that the code of the ransomware payload had strong resemblance to the now defunct Knight group. So again, you can see these groups either are purchasing these payloads from the previous ransomware groups or either changing their names. So Ransom Hub has also distinguished itself from the other variants because it's I think it's the only group which pays up to 90% of the profits to the potential affiliates. Whereas on the other ransomware groups, you can expect somewhere between 80 to 85% of the ransom payments. And this group has also actively recruited professionals or affiliates from disbanded groups such as Alfie, Lockbit, and they maintain a very versatile and regularly updated code base as well. Let's talk about Lockbit. Even though the Lockbit's number 585 is pretty high, there have been suspicions that the group may be overstating their involvement in certain high-profile attacks. There have also been claims for multinational organizations, but in reality, only a small subsidiary has been impacted. Lockbait, which in a bid to remain relevant after being ostracized by much of the underground community post the law enforcement actions as well, has published as high as 68% repeat or straight up fabricated victims on its data leak site. And this was reported by Recorded Future, which is another threat intelligence company. Another group which has benefited a lot from the decline of these other players, such as Lockbit and Alfie, has been Player Ransomware. This group operates with tactics similar to what we have seen with the now defunct and Nokoyawa ransomware strains. And these all ransomware groups, such as Nokoyawa, we have also investigated and provided a detailed report at DFI reports as well. So whenever you get a chance, you can read those reports. So Play Ransomware has successfully compromised over 300 organizations since its inception, which is a lot of number of organizations. Another one which has been emerging, and especially in the last quarter of 2024, did a lot of damage was Akira Ransomware. And the different part about Akira is that it targets a lot of organizations in Latin America, with a notable emphasis on the healthcare sector. However, despite their regional focus, the group has extended its attacks to a diverse array of industries, including education, finance, and manufacturing. So this shows us that yes, threat actors or the ransomware groups do target certain organizations, but they are also opportunistic in nature as well. Because at the end of the day, their goal is to make as much profits as they can from their operations. And another fact is Ransom Hub and Akira are two of the most active ransomware groups who have been allegedly or have been reported to wreak havoc in Puerto Rico. So in the last 6 months, there have been suspicions or report that a lot of ransomware encryptions or ransomware detections have ransomware groups attacks have been performed by Ransom Hub and Akira. So now let's coming on to the another trend. So this shows the top 50 ransomware strains by the median payment size and the payment volume. So this would highlight what kind of organizations these particular ransomware variants are targeting. So let's talk about the high frequency and the low payment groups, which is on the left side orange. So we are seeing groups such as Phobos, Logbait, Medusa, Ink ransomware, indicating that they rely on frequent but smaller ransom payments. Whereas there, on the other side, we can see the high frequency, high payment groups such as Akira, Blackbuster, Alfie, which is also known as Black Cat, Play, showing that these groups successfully extract large ransom amounts frequently. So these are the groups to watch out for. Even though Alfie or Black Cat doesn't exist anymore, but still you can see how they were effective in the last 1 year. Now talking about the low frequency, high payment groups, which you can see on the left-hand side in the yellow box. So you can see Dark Angel, Clop, and Underground Team, which demand massive ransoms, but have very few successful attacks. For example, Dark Angels were reported to have received a payment or a ransom payment of $75 million, which till this point remains the highest ransom payment ever. And the other part is the low frequency, low payment groups, which on the left hand side, the yellow. So you can see a lot of different strains, strain 1 to 8, Trigona, El Dorado. So they have less prominent operations with a smaller ransom demands. And El Dorado is also another ransomware group which has been seen attack organizations in Puerto Rico. So just to provide that context. So we can see these different organizations having their own structure and how they are operating in the environments and what kind of ransom payments they ask for. Alberto, before I move forward, any questions?
I don't have any question from the community, but I think that one of the questions that came to my mind is, how do we know, for example, for Akira, the one that you mentioned that they have present in Puerto Rico, the initial access technique that they use, how they get into the enterprise?
I think it will be tough to provide an instance of how they were able to get into organizations based out of Puerto Rico. That would be all depending on the incident response who has been done on those organizations. But we can see the TTPs, which are usually used by threat actors, be it any ransomware group. So I have been doing investigation in the ransomware groups, ranging from talking about Alfie, Conti. Most of the methods which they employ or leverage are pretty much the same. So so in the next section, I will be talking about some of the commonly seen TTPs as well.
Okay, great.
All right. So moving on to the TTPs. So here I'll be talking about the different techniques which are used by threat actors across a ransomware intrusion. And we'll also see how we can detect those behaviors in our environment as well. So talking about initial access. there have been incidents where the threat actors leverage techniques such as malvertising, search engine optimization, uh, malicious browser update to deliver malware, or even at times legitimate remote management tools such as AnyDesk. So, taking an example of Alfie or a Black Hat ransomware incident, a user unknowingly downloaded a malicious version of advanced IP scanner from a fraudulent website that mimicked the legitimate one, and it leveraged Google's ads, which allowed it to be ranked higher in the search results. So that's one of the techniques which threat actors use a lot. Second would be the exploiting of vulnerabilities in products such as Microsoft Exchange, Citrix, and even in some cases Confluence. There have been cases where threat actors have exploited uh, vulnerabilities such as proxy not shell, which is very common amongst those threat actors. Now, we have also seen threat actors abuse compromised credentials for network access. So this can be through social engineering, phishing campaigns, or even vishing campaigns. So I'll talk about Blackbuster, giving an example. So the threat actors involved in that particular campaign or in particular group, what they do is they impersonate IT or help desk personnel, pretending to conduct generic fixes on a device. So in a Blackbuster ransomware case, this was also reported by Microsoft. The threat actors initiated a type of email bombing attacks where a lot of multiple emails were sent to the target user, and following the email flood, what the threat actors did was they reached out to the victim user via Teams saying, oh, this is something which has happened and we can help you fix that. Now, what after that, what the threat actors do is the threat actor persuade the user to grant them access to their device through a remote management tool known as Quick Assist, as you can see on the screenshot, right? So this particular application or remote management tool is installed by default on a Windows machine. So they don't even have to download any malware or any kind of executable on the device. So which makes the job of the threat actor much easier. In addition, we have seen targeting of unmanaged systems such as Internet Exposed servers, and they're also targeting a lot of systems which do not have any EDR solutions as well. Another thing which there has been an increase is the use of info stealers in the last couple of years. And info stealers such as Redline and Luma Stealer have been the most prominent info stealers in the last couple of years or so. And these are kind of malware which go under the radar because a lot of times what happens is a user in an organization may get infected by info stealer, and the info stealer would be able to grab everything which is on the user's device, such as credentials, any tokens, cookies, all those kind of credentials. And what they would do is they would sell all that information on the dark web to a ransomware group or any other threat actors. So this would allow those threat actors to get initial access into the organization. This is what we saw in the case of Snowflake as well, which this was a breach which happened like a few months ago, last year, 2024, where a threat actor was able to access a system in the Snowflake environment using these credentials from info stealers. So the information stealers will likely remain a threat in 2025, given their prevalence and the ease of use as well. And we'll consider that we can expect even emergence of new info stealers in the future as well, because they are highly popular in the e-crime ecosystem. So that's something to watch out for. So answering your question, Alberto, these are the few ways the threat actors actually get initial access to the system. And another one not mentioned here is through the access brokers. As I talked about in the ecosystem as well, sometimes access brokers use Quackbot or IceID to get the initial access into the system. And then what they'll do is sell this access on the dark web to the person interested. So either it could be ransomware operation, the threat group as well, who can just purchase that access and then upload there or deploy their ransomware payload.
Okay.
Now, coming on to persistence and privilege escalation. Now, after the threat actor has established a foothold in the victim environment, they deploy several techniques to maintain access to the network. So the most common is the scheduled task. It would be either through a deployment of a malware, which upon execution would create multiple scheduled tasks with the system privileges. So as you can see in this particular screenshot as well, they created multiple scheduled tasks running as system privileges. So it allows them to perform a lot of malicious activities as well. Second is bait stop, which is another common technique which is used by threat actors. Third one is addition of new users. So once they have got the access, they would create a user and then add that particular user to a local administrator group as well. So this would allow them to even escalate privileges on that particular victim host as well. The next would be web shells. There have been few incidents where they have targeted an Exchange server or an IIS server, Microsoft IIS server, and they would deploy web shells, which would allow them to run multiple commands, such as discovery commands, and even run some of the payloads as well. The next would be remote access applications. We are talking here about applications such as TeamViewer, AnyDesk, Splashtop, or TerraAgent. And these are the common, some of even quick assist, as we saw in the case of Blackbuster. So in terms of remote access application, they can be used across the different phases of intrusion. It can be either initial access, it can be persistence as well, and it can be either used for lateral movement, which I'll be talking about in the latter slides as well. So how to defend against this remote access application? The first would be having a security policy to block the usage of all these kind of remote access application. Because in a lot of cases, unless and until there's an IT support, there is no actual usage of these kind of applications in the environment. And if blocking of this application is not possible in an environment, we can certainly use even web proxies, because they have some kind of they have a categorization for these kind of tools, such as remote access tools. So you can actually create a detection around it. Whenever a proxy detects a use of a remote access tool, it alert goes to SOC, and then they can perform investigation, whether it's a legitimate purpose or if something suspicious is going on. So that's something which can be leveraged. Now the run keys. So run keys, again, there are multiple run keys which are used by threat actors across intrusion. So in this example, as you can see, a particular threat actor created a registry key named winlogin, and they then in the configuration part, they added some of the executables and even a batch script, which would perform certain actions upon execution. Before I move on, any questions from anyone or any questions on the chat, Alberto?
No question at that point, Yatin.
Okay, all right, great. So now let's talk about defense evasion. First one is process injections. It's one of the most commonly used techniques by threat actor. So what the threat actors would do is, after they have a beacon or Cabal Strike beacon established in the environment, they would use that beacon to inject into various legitimate processes, such as in this case, which is the Windows Update Auto Update client, which is the WAUCLT.exe file, which is a trusted process, and it used to check for system updates. So there is a great blog or a great resource by Sans, which is about the hunting of evil, where they talk about some of the trusted Windows processes or legitimate processes, and what are the parent process of that particular, what should be the parent process of that particular child process. So that information can be used to create a lot of detections around it. If for example, in this case, WUA or ULCLT.exe, it has a parent process which is suspicious or it doesn't match with what we have seen in terms of that poster, that should be an alert. And in the past as well, when I was performing threat hunting as well, I have created a lot of hunt scenarios which used to play around the parent-child process executions, and that was a great detection and great hunt because we were able to find a lot of suspicious things in the environment. Second one would be renaming of executables to mimic as a legitimate system files. So we have seen a lot of ransomware groups or threat actors renaming their payloads such as svchost.exe, taskhost.exe, and even explorer.exe just to evade detections. So in terms of detections, you can see, you can check for any network communications which are being performed by these kind of legitimate system processes. That's another good indicator of something if something is wrong with those particular processes. Another one is disabling of real-time monitoring. That's another commonly used technique with by threat actors. Next would be deletion of traces of malicious activity. So this would be clearing of your event logs, system logs, or even Windows PowerShell logs. One of the utilities which is used to perform this is WEB util, which is used for erasing tracks of any malicious activities, and it's also helpful in hindering some of the forensic investigations. Now, another interesting technique is modification of the Windows registry, which is configured in a certain way that this system after restart boots into a safe mode. So what this does is it disables most of the security appliances, security applications on that particular victim host, and then they are able to run their ransomware payload. And the last one is bring your own driver, vulnerable driver. So this is a technique which has become, which has emerged in the last 1 year or so. A lot of ransomware groups have taken on, have started using this particular technique. So this is called bring your own vulnerable driver, and this allows to disable the security software.
Yatin, excuse me. We had a question from the community, and that said, what applicate? No, what APT, right? It's an application. What APT is he mapping? So that they want to know, but given that you are talking about defense, evasion, which one you are talking specific or they more general?
So these TTPs which I'm talking about are common to all the ransomware groups. I'm not talking about any specific ransomware group here. Yeah.
Okay.
So these are more generic TTPs which are used by different ransomware groups. So I've just combined all of them just to provide an overview. And later I will be taking example of Black Suit ransomware, and then just talk about what are the different things which they did, in our intrusion.
Okay. Great.
So talking about bring your own vulnerable driver or bring your own driver, Ransom Hub has been observed deploying a tool named EDR Kill Shifter. So this what basically does is it loads a vulnerable driver on the system, and then it terminates applications related to antivirus solution. And there has been an increase in use of these tools by various ransomware groups. So that's something to look out for. And there are a lot of great reports written by a lot of different vendors, which talk into detail how this particular technique actually works and how they are able to evade a lot of different antivirus solution or even EDR solutions. Coming on to the next. So discovery. So a lot of these threat actors, after they have persistence, they have established their persistence, escalated their privileges, they use a lot of Windows utilities such as you can see, net.exe, ipconfig, nltest.exe, again net.exe to run commands such as netgroup, domain computers, and so forth. And we have seen a lot of these kind of commands seen across multiple intrusions. They also deploy some of the third-party tools such as Bloodhound. So as you can see on the image on the below, this was after they had run Bloodhound, this image shows what all files they collected after the bloodhound was run. So you can see different files such as groups.json, users.json, computers.json, and so forth. And interesting part is if you see the target file name, I'm not sure if you're able to see it, but I'll just call out as well. C Windows temp DOGI. So this particular target file path or directory has been seen in multiple intrusion as well. So which gives you no idea probably the same affiliates are working across different ransomware groups because it looks like they either have a playbook and they just follow the same things. So that's also something you can look out for if any of the files are created in this particular directory. So that could be potentially a good detection rule as well, because you don't see a lot of use of this particular directory in environment.
Yatin, I have another question from
Yeah.
Kenneth Montalvo.
Yeah.
He asks, what security controls have proven most effective in stopping ransomware attacks? It's more from the prevention side.
But I can still talk about it in terms of, I mean, there are a lot of security controls. First, you can, it's the principle of least privilege. Not every person in the organization needs to have admin privileges. So if you can disable that and try to maintain the principle of least privilege, you can actually prevent a lot of these attacks from even beginning. Because most of the ransomware threat groups, they don't use a lot of sophisticated techniques. And I'll show later as well a talk which I did on the SANS Ransomware Summit in 2022, where I talked about some of the TTPs in 2021. And it's 2025. Majority of the TTPs have remained the same, but they still are very effective. So that shows the security controls are not in place. So that's something to need to look forward to, especially principle of least privileges, not allow anything to be installed or on a victim device, because a lot of times we see a malicious application or a malware was installed on a victim user, and then once they were able to execute it, then all this attack chain happens. So if you are able to stop that, a lot of these different things won't even happen. So talking about some of the other tools, AD-Find, another open source tool which is heavily leveraged by threat actors to perform their operations. Similarly with WMI commands and PowerShell scripts. So these are a lot of different scripts or commands which they run routinely. Like it's something, if you can just also create a detection, but sometimes what I've seen in if you try to create detections around net.exe IP config, it can create a lot of false positive. So it's not the best criteria to create a detection on. Now talking about credential access, now threat actors want to elevate privileges, move laterally as well, even to domain controller. So what they do? So they employ a lot of credential access techniques to extract credentials. So the two tools which we have commonly used is Mimikatz is the primary tool that threat actors still use, which is surprising because Mimikatz, if you try to run on a default Windows 10 or Windows 11 machine, it will still be able to detect it and actually not let it run. But it still happens, which shows the security policies of organizations are not properly configured. Another thing which threat actors do is dump the LSAS process using run dll.32.exe or even task manager. Again, these are two commands. If you try to run on a basic Windows 10 or Windows 11 machine, it will get detected by Windows Defender. So these are the techniques which you can actually detect easily and even stop them from running as well. A few of the other techniques which are used by threat actors is TCCing attack, even Kerberoasting, which again are not very new techniques related to AD. They have been reported like for the last 5-6 years. So ideally, we should be able to detect these kind of TTPs in the environment. And there's another technique which threat actors also leverages, dumping of ntds.database, which is basically a collection of all the information of Active Directory. So what they do is they copy the system registry hive and the NTDS did file from the domain controller, and then they perform offline uh, brute forcing to identify the hashes. Another thing which the threat actors do is, in case of when they are targeting, let's say, an environment which has a vCenter or VMware solutions, what they would do is they would shut down the virtual machine which actually hosts the domain controller, create a copy of the virtual machine disk, and then attach it to a threat actor control VM. And then they would extract the NTDS.did database. Now, another technique which is again talks about highlights how the threat actors are evolving their TTPs. So that is targeting of intra-connect sync servers. So this was a report published by Microsoft, and they attributed this to a particular threat actor named Storm0501, where the threat actor, after gaining access to the on-premises environment, they were able to move laterally to the cloud Azure environment. And in that case, they had targeted the Entra Connect Sync server. So just to provide a bit of a background on what the Entra Connect Sync servers are, they are an on-premise Microsoft solution that synchronizes the on-premises identity and the Microsoft Entra identity of a user. So it will be able to synchronize the password which you have on the on-premises Active Directory to the Entra, which was earlier known as the Azure Active Directory. So what the threat actor did was they were able to locate the Microsoft Entra Connect Sync servers, and they were able to extract the plain text credentials of the Microsoft Entra Connect Cloud and the on-premises sync account, which allowed them to move laterally to the cloud, which I'll be talking about when I come to the lateral movement stage as well. So coming on to the lateral movement, as I talked about, the threat actors were able to extract those credentials from the Entra Connect Sync servers. So after they were able to compromise the synchronization account, the threat actor authenticated using the plain text credential, which they were able to retrieve and get an access token to Microsoft Graph API service. Now, after they have got the access to Microsoft Graph API service, they can perform different kind of operations in the Azure environment. So there have been cases where I've seen the usage of Microsoft Graph API to read emails from different users, transfer or sending off emails from one user to another, and we've also seen exfiltration of data as well.
Yeah, then we have another question from Kenneth. It's more about attribution. He asked, how do you attribute a ransomware attack to a specific group, given the use of common tools?
That's a very good question. So in terms of attribution, especially in the case of ransomware intrusions, it becomes really tough because there are a lot of components involved. As I talked about initially, there are initial access broker who perform their own operations. And sometimes they would give out the access to a ransomware threat group as well. So then the ransomware threat group would come in and perform their own operations. So in this, and there are also, and even if, as Kenneth had mentioned, even if they're using the tools as well, it sometimes becomes difficult to attribute because in a lot of cases we have seen similar tools being leveraged by a lot of threat actors. So you do rely on some of the knowledge base which an investigator or an analyst would have. So let me give an example. Let's take incident involving a player ransomware group. So player ransomware group also collaborates with initial access brokers. So after they have purchased the access from initial access brokers, they would deploy some of the custom tools which they have, such as some of the recon tools. So using that information, yes, these are the tools which are used specifically by threat actor group. We can try to attribute with a higher confidence that these was the particular threat group. Let's say in this case, play was involved, but otherwise it can really get muddy or tough to attribute to particular ransomware group.
I had a question. Because this is a good question. But if we thinking about detection, right? It that really matter? Had they know the attribution, or that what really matter is okay. We know how they basically behave, or the common behavior between all of them, and we can build up different detections and creating some hypothesis based of that particular technique and procedure. What do you think about it?
I think it depends on the priorities of a particular group. So, for example, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm working as a SOC analyst or an incident responder, I would be more interested in looking at what are the different TTPs they have seen, what are the detections, how I can actually stop this attack. But let's say if a threat intelligence analyst is looking into it,
Mm-hmm.
then they would be more interested in talking about who was the threat actor actually behind it, and they would try to attribute. So it all depends on what's the final objective of a
Mm-hmm.
person.
Yeah. I had another question that it came from Peter. He asked, what steps can organizations take to limit attackers' ability to spread the ransomware across their network?
Okay. So let me talk about the lateral movement because
Okay.
it ties in with that, and then I can answer that
All
question.
right.
So for lateral movement, a lot of times the threat actors are using remote access application to move their ransomware payload from the initially compromised victim host to different systems. So you can actually block some of the remote access applications if there is no use of that in the organization. And even if it is, you can allow it only for a need to basis. So that would be one of the cases. Second is remote desktop connection. So if you're working in an organization in a corporate environment, the use of RDP is not that common. For example, if Alberto and I are working in the same organization, it's highly unlikely that we would be doing RDPs into different people's machine. So if there is no use case, you can actually block the use of RDP as well. The next is pass the hash. That's another common technique which we have seen used by threat actors. Previously, in the last few slides, I talked about the principle of least privilege. So if you follow that principle, and even if a threat actor is able to get access to, let's say, a person in the finance department, and that particular user doesn't have the access or privileges to perform any of these commands, let's say execution of PowerShell commands or PSExec or Mimikatz, then the threat actor won't be able to move forward. So that's another way you can actually limit the movement or the ability for the ability of the threat actor to actually move around in the environment. Next, talking about remote file copy to admin shares over SMB, that's another technique which requires admin privileges or higher privileges. So with that particular principle of least privilege, you can block that activity. Similarly with PSExec. So a lot of these things can be limited if you just follow the basic hygiene and have good security policies into the picture. And after you have those security policies into place, then you can work around some of the detections. I hope that answered the question.
Okay.
Now, talking about collection, exfiltration, and impact. So once the threat actors have performed all their activities, they have pivoted to different systems such as file servers, backup servers, and then they have identified important information. Then what they do is they leverage something as WinRAR or 7-zip to create archives of that particular data and prepare them for exfiltration. And in a lot of cases, we have seen threat actors use rclone, S3 bucket, WinSCP, FTP for data exfiltration. And finally, then once the threat actors have achieved their objectives, exfiltrated the data, then they would execute their ransomware payload, which they have copied across the environment using SMB shares or even RDP. And after the ransomware payload is executed, you would see deletion of volume shadow copies as well. So you would see the ransomware payload having the child process of vssadmin.exe or even WMI removing all those volume shadow copies so that the organizations are not able to restore their systems to what they used to look like. Any questions?
No, right now.
All right. So let's talk about a case study on Black Suit ransomware. So this was one of the investigations which I did for the FI report. And this was one of our reports which were actually acknowledged by CISA in their advisory on Black Suit ransomware as well. So Black Suit ransomware group, in comparison to some of the groups which you talked about earlier, Ransom Hub, Play, Black Suit is a closed ransomware group, which means it's not a traditional ransomware as a service. They are very selective in the people they work with. And in August 2024, when the Black Suit ransomware group did their, the CISA, when they published their advisory on this particular group, they confirmed that the Royal Ransomware Group has been now rebranded as a Black Suit, which I had talked about earlier group, like it was Conti, then Quantum, then Royal, and then Black Suit. So these threat groups, threat actors or ransomware groups keep rebranding their name. So let's talk about how the threat actors started from initial access and then they were able to achieve their objectives. So in this particular case, in terms of initial access, the first sign of compromise was execution of a Cobalt Strike beacon. So due to the lack of log sources, we were not able to identify how that particular Cobalt Strike beacon actually landed on the victim host. But yes, this was the first indication that something is not right. So after the victim executed this particular Cobalt Strike beacon, it then established a connection to their team server. And after that, then the threat actors started performing their operations. So for persistence, the threat actors created a run key named SOX5 in the current user registry hive, which was another TTP which we have seen threat actors commonly use, and I talked about in the persistence section as well. So this particular registry entry actually launched a system BC backdoor, which is another common tool which is used by threat actors or ransomware groups for C2 purposes, and actually for proxying for its proxying functionality. So it basically allows the threat actors to access some of the systems which are not publicly available or can be accessed from the internet, or which can be accessed within the network. So after they have established their C2 using Cobalt Strike and system BC, they perform defense evasion. So we looked at some of the things which they did was process injection. So the attackers injected Cobalt Strike beacons into legitimate processes to evade detections. That's something I've talked about earlier as well. The threat actors also enabled remote desktop protocols. So this was done to access some of the file servers, backup servers using RDP. So if we can actually disable our use of RDP using group policies within the organization, this TTP would not be usable by a threat actor. You can actually limit the blast radius. So for credential access, the threat actors use the tool RubyS, which is another open source tool, and Cobalt Strike. So some of the techniques which they did was AS-REP roasting, Kerber roasting, and they also access the LSAS memory to extract credentials. So now after they accessed the credentials, they moved on to the discovery phase, where they performed reconnaissance using Windows utility, which we have seen, ipconfig, nltest.exe, net.exe, queuser, and so forth. And they've also used tools such as ADFind, Sharphound, or Bloodhound, and also PowerShell script known as getDataInfo.ps1. An interesting thing about this particular PowerShell script is this has been used by various ransomware groups. So the first time I came across this particular PowerShell script was in investigation related to Conti ransomware. Then I came across this in Black Suit ransomware. So you can see, and Conti ransomware has been non-existent since 2022, but a lot of affiliates have moved to this different ransomware groups such as Black Suit. So you can see a lot of the affiliates having the same playbooks, having the same tools. They just move to different ransomware groups, but perform the same kind of techniques. Now, coming on to the lateral movement, they transferred a lot of the Kubal strike beacons via admin shares, C shares as well to distribute the ransomware payloads. And they also used RDP to access key servers for further discovery. Now, after they have moved to file servers and backup servers, and they have collected all the information they wanted, they use 7-zip to archive that particular data. And in certain cases on the file server and the backup server, we actually saw threat actors going through some of the confidential files, financial records, and other sensitive informations, and opening them using WordPad.exe, which is not a tool which you will see commonly used in environment. So that was interesting. And finally, once they have exfiltrated all the data, then they deployed Black Suit ransomware, and it was distributed across all the key endpoints, and the encryption initiated and leading to ransom demands. So in a nutshell, you can see a lot of the TTPs, which I talked about in the earlier slides as well. The threat actors are mostly commonly using those TTPs. Nothing major has changed. The only thing I would point out is a lot of threat actors now are trying to evolve their techniques to move laterally to cloud environments, whether it's Azure, in AWS. So that's something to look out for. But a lot of the ransomware groups still use these common TTPs. Any questions?
No, from the community. But I think I will left that question when you complete the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just stop sharing my screens. I just wanted to go through some of the resources which can be used for actually creating detections, and some of the resources which I also have created you can use as well. So if it's okay, Alberto, can I stop sharing? And
Yeah, sure. Let me give me a second here. Right. Yeah, you're fine. Okay. Give me a second, Yatin. The question that I have, Yatin, let's say as a owner of a company, right? Medium size, large company, or even a small one, right? Yep. That's fine. You can send the question. I will ask. I can translate to Yatin. The question I have: what they need to do, right? Because everything depends on the data sources. What they need to do to get the telemetry that is accurate and precise, in the way that they at least start getting detections, right? I just want to get your insight.
I think, as I talked about, irrespective of the size of the organization, especially small and medium organization, I would first put my focus on establishing the security controls in place. Because if we have the basic security controls in place, a lot of the TTPs which I talked about can be avoided. So first action should be putting in basic security controls, such as principle of least privileges, not having administrative rights on every machine in the environment, block the usage of RDPs, right? So those security controls can be very helpful. Secondly, in terms of telemetry, you can start with, if you have an EDR solution, that would be really helpful to start with, just because as you have seen as well, there are hundreds of alerts which are generated from these EDR solutions. So if you have a small team, just have an EDR solution in place. You can start looking at some of the medium or high severity alerts just to see what's happening
Mm-hmm.
and create a playbook around those, create a process around those alerts. See, because so that the teams can actually go through them in a procedural way, not that someone is going through randomly and then you miss out on some of the important stuff. And in terms of telemetry, it all depends on how much you're willing to invest, because you can collect all these kind of telemetry from Windows systems, disparate systems, but how are you going to store that? How many resources do you have? So it all boils down to that. And in a lot of cases, uh, as you mentioned, especially for small and medium organization, they just don't have the resources to look at everything, to have ingestion of logs, and then having go through the alerts as well. So it all depends on what are your priorities. So in my opinion, the best way would be to look to first establish security controls in place, and once we have the basics done, then start with phase wise. Okay, these are my crown jewels. Let me start enabling telemetry for this. These are the different TTPs, which could be which TTPs are the threat actors, which could be targeting a particular organization, let's say a healthcare organization, and then start creating detections, high fidelity detections for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would be another question. How do you know that you have high fidelity detection? But that is more about the process that need to be involved, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's about the process, and also each environment varies. So, for
mm-hmm,
example, if you're working at Microsoft, a detection may not work, may not translate well. But if it's a smaller environment with not a lot of machines, you may get a better ratio for that particular
mm-hmm,
detection. So it's all about going through the detection, testing that, how it
mm-hmm,
is going through, and then once it is in place, having a playbook for it. So whenever an analyst comes across that particular alert, they know how to do it, how to investigate. Because in a lot of cases, I have come across or I have seen public reporting as well, there have always been alerts created or alerts triggered for these kind of TTPs, but it's just that they were overlooked or the organization didn't have the resources to to get through those alerts.
great. I have another question from the community. They asking, how we can redirect this type of attack to a place that doesn't damage the organization. Is that something possible?
Uh, I can you just be what does redirecting mean here in this
Yeah,
context?
they say. I am thinking like the denial service. Normally, when you have the denial service, let's say chill, basically you can redirect the denial service attack to another place, right? Or you have the sinkhole, right? If somebody internally in the organization, they are trying to do the DNS query, to do some type of, you know, beaconing or data filtration via DNS. Is that the case? Um, we can have the sinkhole that basically redirect internally and we can generate the telemetry. They want to know if that's something possible with ransomware. When they are doing the attack, you can do the redirection of that attack to any other place that is not the organization. I think that explain more about the how the ransomware attack, and when you are getting the ransomware, basically, that will be late, right? But if you can explain
Yeah,
the kill chain on that one.
yeah. I think as you've already mentioned, if we have reached that stage that the encryption has started, I feel it's already too late. So we have already been defeated. So yes, there may be ways in terms of the redirection. I am actually honestly not aware of how we can do that. But but rather than reaching that stage, you can just focus on the TTPs, which we have seen before the threat actor is able to actually execute that ransomware. So starting with initial access, you can work on the phishing controls, or you can look into the lateral movements which we see, or execution of tools such as Mimikatz or ADFine. So focusing on that so that you can catch the threat actor before that even before you even reach that stage?
Yeah, I would say, let me explain to be. Yeah, en resumen, ¿verdad? Hay que entender cómo se comporta el actor de amenaza y ver la fase. A este momento, pues ya te menciona que no tiene conocimiento, yo tampoco tengo conocimiento de cómo usted puede redireccionar este tipo de ataques. Básicamente, en el día de hoy se explicaron las diferentes técnicas, ¿verdad? Por la fase de ataque. Cuando usted, como organización, ve que hay un ransomware, ya es tarde, por decirlo así. Usted tiene que empezar a trabajar a nivel de lo que es, vamos a decirlo así, a nivel de SOC, nivel 1 y nivel 2, la parte de manejo de incidentes, empezando con la alerta. Tiene que tener un proceso en su compañía donde la fuente de informaciones, lo llamamos data sources, que esté inyectando, tenga un proceso donde verifique cuán preciso es la telemetría que está adquiriendo para esto, para tener, estamos hablando de high fidelity alert, para poder tener un alto grado de fidelidad en la alerta antes de pasarlas a producción, que la forma tal que el SOC lo utilice, el Security Operations Center lo vaya a estar utilizando, tiene que haber un proceso en donde esté envuelto lo que le llaman detection engineering, que son los ingenieros de creación de detecciones, junto con los dueños de la fuente, donde verifiquen los requerimientos de la estructura de los logs, se generen pruebas en base a ataques. Ahí puede colaborar, nosotros le llamamos Purple Team, básicamente se colabora con el equipo rojo, el Red Team, donde va a estar ejecutando estas técnicas de las que se quiere generar la alerta. Dependiendo del volumen, se le da un tiempo para hacer este tipo de pruebas. Ya entonces se define si vale la pena o no, si es ruidoso o no, dependiendo de la técnica que se esté ejecutando, cómo se refleja en el ambiente. Así que es un proceso detrás de todo esto. No es tan fácil como decir, tengo una fuente de información, envío, la añado al SIM y entonces estoy viendo alertas. Hay un proceso que le llaman el onboarding process, que está envuelto en la parte de ingeniería de seguridad, trabajando con el Security Operations Center, para poder entonces definir y proveer esta alerta a producción. Espero, y para poder detectar esto, pues nuestra recomendación es que se trabaje, si hacemos referencia a lo que es el Cyber Kill Chain, que podamos ir entonces al principio, a las fases iniciales, para poder entonces detectarlo en las primeras fases del ataque, para poder entonces tratar de no llegar a lo que es un ransomware, porque ya básicamente la información ya se la llevaron. Y usted está viendo entonces el impacto de este ataque, que puede estar meses dentro de la organización y usted no se da cuenta, si no tiene la telemetría adecuada, de que han estado en el ambiente de su compañía. Espero que haya contestado la pregunta. Yatin, I just extend a little more, elaborate more about, what we talk about cyber kill chain, what is the process behind to define really high fidelity alert, what are the roles that are involved in that process, right? Seeing that let me see if we have another question. Well, I don't see another questions. No veo que tengamos alguna pregunta de la comunidad. Yatin, something else that you want to share before
Yes.
we continue?
Can you share my screen now? So
Yeah, sure.
I
Let me give me a second. Everybody can see it.
it should be the DFI report page.
Yeah, we can see that. We can see that here. Ya Yatin está presentando el website de DFIR. Básicamente, that reported from SANS Ransomware Summit 2022.
Yes.
All right.
So I wanted to talk about this one.
Okay.
So when I had presented on the at the ransomware summit, what we had created this particular resource talking about all the detection rules which can be used to create detections in your environment using Sigma rules. So we have divided all the Sigma rules within each category. So if I go initial access, these are the different Sigma rules which you have. So you can go to them, see what are the detection rules, and try to incorporate with whatever solutions you have available in your organization. Now, similarly, we have each of them for each phase. Persistence, I talked about creation of scheduled tasks. So there is a, what do you say, Sigma rule available for that. Base drop, again, Sigma rule available for that. Web shells and remote access tools. For the different remote access tools, you can actually go to them, check for any desk, splash top process, and use these detections to create alerts in your or in your organization. So that's a very helpful resource. You can actually go through them, check out all the different Sigma rules which are there, and try to create something along those lines. And this is the main page which we have. All the different reports which you can come across. So we have done recently on Logbit. There was one on Black Suit, Black Cat, and we are always try to release more reports and yeah, extensive reports detailing all the different TTPs. Now the next link is this one website called ransomware.live. So you can actually see a lot of different kind of statistics such as who were the recent victims, check out some of the cyber attacks which were reported in the news, which are the different threat groups or the ransomware groups, and what was their last victim. For example, 8base, their last targeted a school. And this is another interesting feature which they have. So these are negotiation stats. So if you're interested, you can actually go and click on this and see how the negotiation chat actually went through. So how the person who may be working for the organization actually worked with the threat actor to get their information back, what was the ransom paid, and all those kind of things you can look at.
Yeah, that's a great resource, Yatin. Thank you for share. Since that Yatin, I have some from the community asking how they can communicate with you.
Definitely, I'll share that information as well.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of TTPs as well, this particular website has TTPs of particular threat actors. So let's say if I go to Plaxo, so they have divided all the different TTPs which they use across initial access, privilege escalation, and so forth. So you can check out all those things as well for different threat groups. So they have Alfie, Blackbuster, Ransom Hub, Medusa, 8base, and Hunters International Dragon Force. Another resource which I had was this ransomware tool matrix. So it talks about all the different tools which are used by this ransomware group. So if I go to this particular repository, tools, so they have divided all the different tools which are used across different key kill chain. So credential theft, these are the tools which are used. Defense evasion, again, different set of tools.
Yeah, the question that I have, these are the link that you have in the deck in presentation.
Yeah.
These are okay, all of them. Okay, great.
All of them are there in the last slide of useful resources.
Okay. Yeah, we because I know that they will ask. I think that I can include this link as for the streaming, but we have the Discord server where we share resources. Is that fine with you? We can have a copy in PDF of the deck and share in the Discord server.
Yeah, definitely we can do that. So after the presentation, I can send you the final presentation, and then you can put it on the Discord.
Okay, great. I think that because they asking me how contact you and about the presentation.
Yeah. So this is the tool matrix, and then the person who has created this has another for a vulnerability as well. So if I go to, let's say, Microsoft, so these are the different vulnerabilities which are used by different ransomware groups. So let's say Blackbuster uses this particular vulnerability, and they have the list of all the other different vulnerabilities as well.
Okay, great. Great resources. Let me switch to Spanish. Yatin va a estar compartiendo la presentación. Así que vamos a estar proveyendo la presentación con los enlaces. También vamos a estar poniendo los enlaces como parte del streaming. Vamos a compartir la presentación vía PDF en nuestro Discord server. Si ustedes van a www.semillasabe.org, van a poder ver la mano izquierda, la parte de arriba, las diferentes redes sociales. Si no están registrados en el Discord server, les recomiendo que se suscriban. Ahí hay información ya compartida de otros talleres que hemos hecho para la comunidad. Así que los invito a que puedan entrar y también pues nos sigan en las redes sociales. Estamos en Instagram, en LinkedIn también. Así que pueden también ir a nuestras redes sociales para participar con nosotros y comunicarse con nosotros. Yatin, I have some announcement, but before we switch, I don't see any. Yeah.
So I've put my LinkedIn URL as well on the chat, like the YouTube chat. If someone wants to go through that and connect with me, they can.
Let me take it from here. Okay, you including the chat from the streaming, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. They will see it. That's great. Also, I can include it as for the comments of the streaming later when we end the live.
No worries.
Well, Yatin, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate that and that you are sharing with the community. And we will keep in touch in the future.
Thank you so much, Alberto, for having me, and I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation and learned something new. And
no, you get some comment from Kenneth and Peter. They like your presentation. Giving thank you to you for all the content. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, Yatin.
All right, bye-bye.
Bueno, espero. Sí, vi, Yatin compartió el enlace de LinkedIn en la parte de comentarios. Supone que lo vean. Si no es así, yo le voy a hacer llegar, lo voy a poner, incluirlo en los comentarios en un momento para que entonces se puedan comunicar con él. También quiero compartir, antes de terminar la sesión, tenemos dos anuncios. Nuestra fundación Semilla Cyber, que es una organización sin fines de lucro, para los que nos están escuchando por primera vez, estamos establecidos en Puerto Rico. Vamos a tener en nuestra primera reunión presencial, va a ser en marzo 13. Déjenme compartir por aquí. Voy a compartir con ustedes. Vamos a estar, hemos estado trabajando. Eso van a saberlo luego. Pues tenemos muchas cosas nuevas que ustedes van a ver durante este año. Nosotros, la reunión de la fundación se va a llevar a cabo marzo 13 en la oficina de PRI. Así que PRI nos está donando su salón de adiestramiento para hacer nuestra reunión. Esa reunión va a ser para nosotros, para la fundación, para la comunidad, yo creo que extremadamente importante. Con nosotros van a estar participando representantes de 3 agencias federales. Vamos a tener representantes de CISA, vamos a tener representantes de Homeland Security Investigation, vamos a tener representantes del FBI y el CISO de Puerto Rico en una sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Así que la pregunta que ustedes tengan, les invito. Se va a estar promoviendo esta reunión ya para la semana que viene. Les invito que estén pendientes a la promoción, se registren y puedan llegar allá, compartir con nosotros durante ese día, haciendo todas las preguntas que tengamos con relación a las funciones de estas diferentes agencias y que a nivel de Puerto Rico, qué se está haciendo y cómo la comunidad podemos participar, ¿verdad? Para ayudarlo, ya que la expertise está de nuestra parte. También, lo otro anuncio que tenemos es que para marzo 25, nosotros empezamos a colaborar con la Universidad Interamericana de Puerto Rico. Para marzo 25 vamos a estar la fundación de 9 a 11 y media de la mañana. Ellos están celebrando durante esa semana la Semana de las Ciencias. Así que el día que nos toca a nosotros participar y compartir con todos los estudiantes y con la comunidad va a ser en marzo 25. Vamos a estar de 9 a 11 y media de la mañana. Vamos a tener nuestro booth, vamos a dar la charla y vamos a tener un taller práctico. Así que si usted está cerca, estoy en Guayama, si está cerca, dése cita ese día para que entonces pueda conocer todo lo que ofrece la universidad, pero también pueda participar con nosotros en la comunidad y poderlo conocer a usted y pueda unirse a como un voluntario, ¿verdad? Voluntario, si usted lo desea, para poder compartir y poder proveer conocimiento a otras personas que quieren entrar a este dominio o a esta profesión en el área de ciberseguridad. Así que esos son los dos anuncios que tenemos por el momento. Esté pendiente, estamos trabajando otras cosas más que vamos a traer ahora a principios de año. Lo estaremos compartiendo en nuestras redes sociales. Con esto dicho, muchas gracias por participar, estar con nosotros durante esta hora y media y nos vemos, Dios mediante, en marzo en Puerto Rico. Estaremos allá compartiendo con ustedes. Que pasen muy buenas noches.